Our keynote speakers will unlock our ability to think outside the box. Mr. Jordan Barrocas and Zach Morrison. Jordan is the founder of Three Jerks Jerky. He appeared on ABC's Shark Tank in fall 2015 and earned a $100,000 investment. Three Jerks Jerky makes themselves all-natural beef jerky made with filet mignon. Jordan is an avid supporter of the JA Fellows program. Zach Morrison is the president of Elite SEM. This company has been named Best Workplace for Millennials by Fortune magazine. Elite SEM is an award-winning digital marketing agency. Zach supports not only JA Fellows program, but the JA Career Bound as well. We will hold a town hall style meeting with the questions you previously submitted. Please help me give a warm welcome to Jordan Barrocas and Zach Morrison.
Hello.
Morning, guys.
Morning.
Okay, so the first question our JA Fellow students submitted is, how do you keep employee motivation and morale high? Sent by a JA Fellows company at Stoneman Douglas High School.
Yeah, I think the first thing is aligning everybody's incentives the same towards one goal. A company has a goal, it has a mission, and where companies tend to fail and leaders tend to fail is that the employees have no motivation and no incentivization to reach whatever that goal is. So a leader is standing up in front of the company and trying to get everybody rallied behind a goal, rallied behind a mission, and if the company hits that goal, the employees have no stake in that. And this it can be financial, or it can be awards, it can be recognition, whatever it is that the employees care about, but it's all about aligning everybody to the same goal and mission.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think employees need to know why they're doing what they do, and largely motivation has changed from purely financial to that of mission. So I see a lot of companies that develop a strong culture, develop a strong mission, a vision, and if their employees align with that and understand why they're doing what they do, they tend to be a lot happier. In the past, I think financial incentives, bonuses, salaries were key drivers of employee satisfaction. And I think for our generation today, that's less relevant, and more is understanding why someone's doing what they're doing and aligning with where a company's going. It ultimately comes down to culture and having aligned and matched culture. So we'll probably talk a bit about culture when we go through these questions, but that's kind of an overarching theme, I think, when it comes to employees, is just making sure there's a fit and alignment with culture.
Remember, every employee is different, right? So every human being is different. If you look at whoever's sitting next to you, you guys are different. And you have different goals and motivation in life. So when you're leading people, if I'm leading 2 or 3 people and I just assume that they all have the same motivations in life and the same things that make them happy, and just create one way of doing things, that's not going to work, because every person is different, they have their own motivation. So know who you're leading as well and what they're motivated by too. So you might have some employees that are motivated by equity, you might have some employees that are motivated by social consciousness or recognition or whatever it is, but make sure that you have a culture that kind of has that ability to reach everybody.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next question, does anyone in the audience have one that they'd like to ask? Okay, I'll come back to you.
So the second question submitted was, how important is the selection of the leadership team to the success of the new business? Sent by our JA Fellows company at Calvary Christian Academy.
So when I read this question, I kind of chuckled a little bit, because the idea of a leadership team in an entrepreneurial startup is one person, right? How important is the leadership team? Well, in a large organization, tremendous. In an entrepreneurial startup, it's somewhat less relevant. because generally companies start by one person or two people and founders, and that person has to occupy multiple roles. So I guess just to answer the question, leadership teams are critical for experience, like being able to put together a group that has knowledge and experience in whatever business or part of the business that you're trying to start or achieve something on is critical. But keep in mind that if you're going to start a business, it's going to be on generally your shoulders. So leadership team's important, but a little bit down the road too.
Yeah, I mean, when we first started the company, it was me, one other guy, and now we have 500 employees that work for us across the country. And you know, I think Jordan's right. At the beginning, there is no such thing as a leadership team. You're doing every job, and you need to be ready to do every job with really not much satisfaction in return for a long time. But over time, a leadership team is incredibly important because the truth is you can't do it yourself. At first, you must do it yourself, and then eventually you can't do it yourself, and that's really important to understand. So building the leadership team is huge, and it's important. You have to figure out what you're great at and what you're passionate about as the company grows, and then divvy up the responsibilities to other folks and to the skills that they have. So as you build the leadership team, focus on what you're great at, and then you need to fill the team with folks that can support you, that can complement you with other skills.
So let's like build on that a little bit. So when you build your leadership teams, what do you look for in leaders for your different departments?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing you have to look for at first is a culture fit, right? What are you looking for in a human being? What are their values is the most important thing. And then after that, you're looking for skill. So we use something in our business called a scorecard. And pretty much that's writing down all of the key things that person is going to need to accomplish in the role. And you're going through that to make sure that they're able to that they have the skills to achieve those. The other thing I look for in our leadership team is diversity. Diversity comes in all aspects of it. Diversity of thought is the most important one. I don't want everybody who thinks the same way. You want people who are thinking different ways about different things. So that's really, really important.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that is work ethic. Background, resume, experience, it's all important, but someone with really strong work ethic I found can accomplish anything, and someone with the perfect resume that doesn't want to work won't get anything done. So leaders have to lead by example, and the only way to do that is to work.
Thank you.
Not passionate about it. You won't be. Eventually, you know, whatever it is will steer you away from success, because if you're not passionate about what you're doing, that's what I look for. I look for people that are absolutely just passionate about what it is that they're charged with doing and what the company's mission is as well.
Yeah, and I look at this question as like, how do you put the right people together in the right team to make sure that the team functions? And there's actually a lot of science behind this now. A lot of companies are using personality indicators. Myers-Briggs is a good one out there, and then they can use data to actually determine what people will work best together to produce whatever outcome they're looking for. So it's a little bit kind of on the techie side of stuff when it comes to people, but data can actually help determine outcomes of teams. So that's one thing. And then another thing is a lot of times people will self-select. So if you develop a culture in your company, and even underlying teams, if they develop their own culture, people will either sink or swim. So, they'll align or they won't, and if they don't align, they'll self-select themselves out. So it's an interesting way of just thinking about things that let people decide for themselves, but create a landscape where they have the opportunity to either buy in or self-select out.
And our next question.
Another question that kind of I like, because it's an opportunity to think about things a little bit differently. So, what is marketing? I think is the first answer here. So, Does anyone want to speak up and give me a definition on like what you think marketing is to you, or somebody? Yeah, go for it.
Showcasing your product to like the public.
Showcasing. Okay. Any other definitions? Advertising. Like showcase, advertising. So a lot of times we think about marketing as pretty much that, like equivalent to advertising. But marketing is much more. So there's a definition, it's called the 4 Ps of marketing: product, price, place, and promotion. So your product is essential to marketing. What is the product? What's the market? Is there product market alignment? That doesn't have anything to do with advertising or really social media. Price. What's the pricing strategy? Again, not really advertising, not really social media. Place. So where is the product going to be sold? Is it digital? Is it brick and mortar? Is it direct to consumer? Is it B2B? Social media might play into that, but again, not necessarily the key driver. And then promotion. That's where we get into showcasing or advertising, and clearly social media is critical there. Zach has much more experience in talking about that than I am, but what I wanted to highlight is that marketing is much broader, and so often we just zone in on the idea of advertising as the key to marketing, but it's really just a portion of a quarter of what marketing really is. So the big takeaway for me in this question is just to think broader about marketing and making sure that when we think about that we're thinking about the product, the price, the place, not just the promotion of it, which you have a very great expert here that can talk about that.
Yeah, so my company does digital advertising. So we focus on helping customers like Etsy and Nike and Hugo Boss and all sorts of businesses advertise on Google, Facebook, or Instagram mainly, and Amazon as well. So, but there's no one size fits all. So yes, I like the guy who said advertising because that's what I do for a living. I agree. But you can see Jordan's more of the product marketer, right? But the most important thing to think about is think about your customer. Who is your customer? Who is actually going to buy that product, and where are they? Are they at are they at an event? Are they searching online? Do they spend a lot of time on social media? We have customers that, are spending millions and millions of dollars every month advertising on Amazon and advertising on Google, and they spend $0 advertising on Instagram. Why? Because at the moment that their consumer is going to be ready to purchase or make that consideration, they're not on social media. Now on the other side of it, take a client like an Etsy or somebody to that example, or they're all over social media. Why? Because their consumer lives on social media. So social media is important, but as Jordan said, let's think broader about the question. And let's think about where a consumer is. So let's think about Jordan's business, right? The filet mignon beef jerky. So raise your hand if you have had filet mignon beef jerky before. Okay, now raise your hand if you would, how much does it cost again? $8. How much, raise your hand if you would buy or pay $8 for filet mignon beef jerky. Okay. Now, this is a focus group, right? We don't have time all day to do this, but really, then I would ask all of you guys questions about where was the last time you bought it? Was it in a store? Did you buy it online? What made you buy it? All of these different questions. The most important thing is marketers and business owners are the worst people in the world to decide marketing plans because they're biased. The most important people to help determine a marketing plan is the customer and understanding who they are and being there in that moment.
Yeah, and this, like our answers, it isn't to diminish the importance of social media. Like, social media is critical in business because it's critical in life. But the idea, I think often so many young entrepreneurs think like, okay, I'm going to put a product and put it on Instagram and it's just going to sell. Or I'm going to put it on Facebook and it's going to sell. they fall short because you got to look at things comprehensively, number one, and number two, you got to look at it from the customer's perspective, like Buddy mentioned. But social media itself is a tool, and it's got to be used, and it's not just for marketing. We do customer service on social media. We communicate with, not just with sales, but branding, all of that. So think about social media as like a part of life, not just as a way to sell or a way to advertise.
It's a part of your customer's journey. Exactly. Anybody got a question yet? No, we let you guys warm up. There we go. All right.
In a situation where you can't choose like your business partner, say like a classroom, how do you gather everyone like with different backgrounds and stuff to go on one idea, support that idea, even though they don't want to do it?
So to repeat the question, make sure I heard it was, in a setting where you don't get to choose your business partners, how do you motivate them? How do you get them to run towards the goal? Was that the question? So look, as an entrepreneur, you get to choose, and as an owner of a company, we get to choose, but our
Kind
needs,
of.
what?
Kind of.
Well, once you sell the business, then you don't really get to choose. But you get to choose, but that's not totally normal in business. And then also, by the way, think about it this way, is we hire our leadership teams, but the leadership team doesn't get to pick each other, so they have to work with each other. So it goes back to, I think, a statement that I made earlier, which is, if these guys are your team, ask them what they care about. What do they want to do? What are they motivated by? And tell them what you're motivated by and what your goals are, and you have to ask them to rally behind that. And find putting people in the right seats is the most important part.
Yeah, and buy-in is critical to accomplishing anything, right? So if you're working on a class project or something like that, you have an idea of the way you want something to be done, and maybe someone disagrees or they're not motivated like you are, but you're put in a bind, right? So how do you get them to buy in? One, it starts with having a good idea, right? You can't get people to buy into a bad idea. If you think it's the greatest thing in the world and it's a terrible idea, no one's going to rally behind you. So, a lot of times we look at other people's actions and say like, oh, they're dumb or they don't get it. Is that the case, or is it that your idea is terrible, right? So sometimes self-reflection might be important to get buy-in and realize that maybe you need to be doing something differently or come up with a different idea or a different approach. Like with the example Buddy gave with marketing and advertising, how the customers really need to be the ones that dictate strategy. Same thing with leadership. If you're trying to lead people and they're moving in the other direction, maybe you're the one who needs to move in the other direction.
So being an entrepreneur, you have to be a little bit arrogant. You do, right? But it's the confidence side of arrogance that's important, but you have to have a humbleness. You will get humbled being an entrepreneur. You will. Jordan and I were talking about this last night.
By the way, it was Zach's birthday 2 days ago, so I think you guys should all wish him a happy birthday.
He's 43. Jordan keeps calling me buddy. Jordan and I have known each other since we were like 7 years old. We went to elementary, middle, high school, everything together. So he calls me buddy, which is my nickname from growing up. Now I lost where we were.
Your 44th birthday.
It was not my 44th birthday. We're talking about something. Sorry.
Being humbled as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, we were toast last night at dinner. We were talking about different entrepreneurs. We were talking about investing in different companies. And we said our favorite entrepreneurs to invest in were ones that had failed because they had been humbled. And they still had that, and if they've on to their second venture, that means they still had that confidence in them, but they were humbled. So as a leader, the way to get your people rallied around you is be confident in your idea, but also be humble that you don't know everything.
Yeah, I mean, we can go off on a tangent here, but honesty, vulnerability are I think, critical characteristics in being a leader, because people are smarter today and they just see through it. And this isn't necessarily so applicable to your question of a class project, but in a broader sense of just how to lead. you just got to be an open and honest person, and just kind of cut through all the crap. And these people see through it today.
Who else? Questions? Entrepreneurship, leadership, work, life.
This question is to both of you all. If you had a chance to go back to your high school self, is it one thing you would tell yourself as it relates to maybe having a business mind or an entrepreneurial mindset?
So,
High school self.
so the question is, if we could go back to high school, what would?
Well, if you could go back in time, quote unquote, and talk to your high school self, would you give your high school self what piece of advice?
One piece of advice to my high school self. I was never the best student. I was in kind of the middle of the road classes. I was a B and C student, and most of my friends were all in honors classes and went to like Ivy League schools, and that bothered me. But I hustled. I brought food in. I would sell lunches because people didn't like the school lunch, so I sold lunches. I did all sorts of other random stuff. I would go back and tell myself, just keep hustling, keep outworking everybody, and that school is important, because sometimes I didn't maybe pay attention where I should have because I wasn't the honor student. So I would tell myself, pay attention a little bit more, but just keep hustling, because that's what you're great at. You're great at that side. Don't worry so much. You're never gonna, you're not gonna be the Ivy League honor student.
Yeah, so if the question is like, what would I tell myself with the objective of being a better entrepreneur? Sell something, like Buddy's example of selling sandwiches. It's an important trait and a characteristic just to be able to develop early on, is the ability to sell something and the desire to sell something. At the end of the day, any entrepreneur is a salesman. Businesses are there to sell. It's the core function. Everything else supports selling. So developing that ability earlier on is better. I'm a believer that it's kind of a innate characteristic, those who can and like to sell versus something that can be learned. It's not like a mathematical formula, but practice makes things better, so practice selling.
We would love to continue with questions, but unfortunately we only have time for one more. Does anyone else have any questions?
How do you know your customers will buy your product, and how will you know who your target market is?
Practice. You really don't. So when I started the filet mignon beef jerky company, I thought I'd have a particular customer, and it changed over time and continues to change over time. The great thing about business today is that things happen really fast, and you can test and iterate and test and iterate and test and iterate. So to me, business is a process of failing, learning, changing, failing, learning, changing. So through that process, you'll learn who your customer is at a particular point in time, which will change, right? And you'll gain conclusions. So any other way is purely speculative, and sometimes you might be right, sometimes you might be wrong. There's no way to tell without testing. So long story short, try, learn, try again.
Solve a problem, or find something that there is a gap that doesn't exist, right? So if you look at Uber, taxis existed, but the friction to using a taxi didn't make any sense for today's world. If you think about even something that was iterated of, in the music industry, right? There was iTunes, and you used to have an iPod, and you'd download songs. That made no sense. And somebody, came out with Spotify, right? So just looking for a gap in the market, looking for something that's broken, and fixing problems. And then you gotta learn to sell.
Thank you, Mr. Barrocas and Mr. Morrison. Let's give
give them a round of applause.